So this video is aimed at people who haven't done any beach fishing before. So pretty obviously you need to start with a rod and reel. Now in the UK for years now it's been traditional for people to have 12-foot beach casting rods, and the second-hand marketplace is absolutely full of 12-foot rods. Now I suggest that most people can start off with a 12-foot rod. Now this is a beautiful case in point here. This is a 12-foot rod that we've had, that Charlie had for years and years and years. It's a beat up old thing. It's had a lot of the eyes replaced. And look, this shows you how old it is. This is a really old style rod where the I think that's called a choke ring, where the last ring before the reel actually, do you know what? Looking at this, I think this is actually a multiplier rod. That just goes to prove that what I'm proving is the case in point. So this is a really old rod. Now when you pick up an old rod, there's three main points to check for you to be able to use it. Has it got a reel seat? Does the reel seat wind? Do the fittings look all okay? Is it lined up with that first ring? Yes, so the reel seat's fine. The next one, and this is probably the most important one, seconds out, is the spigot. Now the spigot is the join between the sections. Now 12-foot beach casters only have two sections, and that's why a lot of us only like using rods that come in two pieces, because you've only got one spigot, one joint to worry about. Now this is going to be a bit awkward in this room, but when you put your spigot in, see, I can see that spigot is quite worn down. But on the newer rods, there's a mark where the spigot ends. But you push it down and you want to make sure that it grips and that it doesn't just flop out. Because when it's worn down, the spigot, it gets very, very loose. Anyway, so that's the spigot. Make sure the spigot has got some wear still in it. Now the next thing, and this is a crucial thing, check the condition of the eyes. Each individual eye, because what can happen quite easily, I'm just checking up there to make sure there's none missing, that the inner ceramic can get chipped, even it can break and split in the middle there. Now if it does split, when you're actually casting and winding in, you will hang on. No, that's got a ceramic in, but it's just a different ceramic because that's been a replaced tip as well. But yes, as I was saying, if you've got a damaged ring, especially these top three, where the rod's bending over and the line's running through the bottom, it can damage your line and you can have crack-offs quite easily. So these are the crucial ones to check. So that'll do with the rod. In summary, it doesn't really matter what rod you use. Oh, I know something I didn't talk about. Each rod will have it written on the butt section here, and you won't be able to see it because it's so worn in age, this one. But it will have the casting weight of the rod. Now that is actually crucial information. The casting weight on this rod is 4 to 8 ounces. That generally includes the bait on these older rods. So as it says 4 to 8, I'm going to be throwing out just about 5 ounce weight on it. And because it's a 4 to 8 and it's quite a thick rod, I can already tell you it's going to be able to cast quite a heavy weight. So it'll be good for, you know, the bad wind conditions when you need a slightly heavier weight. But that's more advanced details. We're just concentrating on the basics. So the casting weight of the rod is crucial. I'll come back to that later. So now we turn to the reel. Now I've got here a really cheap reel. It's a Vigor Silk 50 FD. Now you can buy these new for about 10 or 15 pound. So again, I'm just proving to you, you can grab yourself cheap stuff and fish and catch fish on it. Same thing with as there was for the reel, a couple of things to look out for. Does the bail arm move? I'm not necessarily worried about does it shut when you turn the handle. Does the bail arm move? Yes. Does the clutch move up and down? And when you unscrew it and take the spool off, does everything look okay? Nothing's sealed up, seized up. See, look, little bit of rust on the metal there, but that won't matter. This is, while I got that off, what I do with my reels, and I did with this reel as soon as I got hold of it, I lubricated it with a bit of 3-in-1 oil. You can use just any old oil, but I always put some down here. Some people say that you shouldn't because it can go down in the grease, through the bearing into the grease and mess the grease up. But do you know what? For a cheap reel, it doesn't really matter. This isn't an expensive thing. So I did put some oil down that spindle. I put oil basically on all the moving parts. And like I said, I use 3-in-1 oil. And I go completely over the top on it. I put it on all the little bit, anything that turns, anything that's metal, all the little screws, because you're going to want to get to those sometime in its life. All these little bits, just drop some 3-in-1 in it. Grab the thing. Is there any play in it? No. Does it feel alright? Yes. Because at the end of the day, all the reel does is hold the line. Now that's the next subject. If you go into your local tackle shop, they invariably will have a cheap bin. Look in the cheap bin and find something like a 15 pound or 18 pound breaking strain, what's it called, monofilament line. Or if your dad fishes or your uncle or anybody, get hold of some line. Again, it doesn't matter as long as the line is not too old. If it's old, it could be perished. And you can buy, this isn't one of them, this is something I just had spare down in my shed. You can buy some line from the tackle shop. I know, I did it last year for £5. 15 or 18 pound is good for your main line. Now, we're going to fill this up with the 15 pound, but I'll introduce something else to you now. 15 pound line is not the only line you'll be putting on here. You need some line put on afterwards called shock leader. And I won't worry too much about it for the moment, but I'm going to be using some much thicker 60 pound line for the shock leader. We'll come back to that later. So this is a knot I've learned only in the last year or two, but I'm found now it's working pretty brilliantly. Get the end of your main line, your line you're going to stick on there, and tie an overhand knot. So you come back on yourself and you've got a loop and you go through once. Keep a short tag at the end of it. Hang on, that's unslipped. Difficult doing it this way. Right, there you go. Put it tight, as tight as you like. So now we've got a little knot in there. Trim the tag off, so you've got a little bit left. Now, do another loop. Take this tag over the line, back round, and do an overhand down here. Bit fiddly with my fat thumbs. So you got that situation. You can pull that gently, tight. So what you got here now is a loop. When we put this on the reel, you'll find when we tighten up, this will slip through, but it won't go any further because of that little stop knot. So, look at me. I've made a mistake already. Because if I put this on here, I'm stuffed, aren't I? I've actually got to thread this through the eye. And this isn't a problem because I can do it now. So we'll thread that through the top eye. You see that right? Thread that through the top eye and down to the reel seat. So let's attach the... Right, I'll come back to that in a second. Let's attach the reel. So now we've got the reel. We've got the line that we've just fed through. Make sure your bail arm is lifted up. And pull. As we pull, you'll see it slipped through. Now, before we pull it tight, move that down to the bottom of the spool. And I've, again, forgotten something else I wanted to do. So let's just pop this spool off. As you reel like this, see this spindle is going up and down. When we fill the line, we actually want that spindle to be extended fully. So that's something else I should have done to start with. So we've got it extended fully. All that means is that as we've got the spool extended, it will start filling from the bottom of the spool. Very difficult doing these things with one hand. Right, there we go. We're on. Bail arm over. I always grab the line like that so that you put a bit of tension on it. Don't put too much tension on to start with. Throw on a couple of loops. Now, it's always advisable to take the line off of the spool the way it was put on. So you don't want to leave it like this because that will introduce kinks into your line. You need your line really to come off like this. So I'm going to have to ask for an assistant. Hang on. Stick this through the middle of it and then go from the other side, mate. There we go. So now it's just going to run off that spool. I've got a bit of tension here to tension it onto the... Can you see it going on the reel? And it's going to take a lot. When you're filling up, you don't want to overfill it, because if you do, when you're casting or just doing whatever, you might get some line spill off over the top here. So if you look closely, is that focusing? You can see they're a couple of mil short. And that'll do, because don't forget I'm going to put some thicker line on now as well. So we'll cut this line down here. So there's the main line on. So now I'm going to stick the shock leader on. Now what I need to do now is to connect both parts of the rod. It's a bit of an overkill this, but this is what I like doing, because the shock leader that you're going to put on needs to be the length of the rod, basically 2 lengths of the rod. So what we'll do now, we'll get our shock leader. Now this, you can get proper shock leader, which is tapered shock leader, but again, that's a bit further on than where we are now. So I was just looking, something I didn't mention earlier. When nowadays there's a different style of rod that's flooded the marketplace called continental rods. The continental rods have got very thin, small diameter eyes at the top. These old rods haven't. They've got quite big holes in them. So you need to think about that when you're thinking about your shock leader knots. Because if you've got a continental rod, which you won't have at the moment because we're doing basics, then you need a smaller knot. So you might go for this tapered shock leader. But for this, again, which is still just basic stuff, we're going to just go with... In fact, I can't even read it. Let's have a look. It doesn't even call it shock leader. It's just £60 line. But I've used it a lot and it works fine. Right. So what I do, I always thread the shock leader all the way through the line and do my knot down here, as opposed to doing the line all the way up and back through, because you've measured out some of your line already. So I'm just going to go off camera and thread this line through. So there you go, the £60 line is threaded through the eyes. So what we do now, and this is one of many knots you can do. I can never remember the name of this knot, but that does not matter. Did you see what I did then? So, overhand knot. Cameraman got a problem?
Funny.
Overhand knot, go back through twice, 3 times. Pull it slowly and you'll see magic. There you go. So we've now got a figure of 8 knot there. So now grab your line that came off your reel, your main line, your £18, £15, whatever. You want to go through one of the holes, this is really difficult without glasses on, and up the other one, pull it through, and now this side of the knot here we're going to tie basically a uni knot. Pull out enough of the yellow main line as you want, pull it back on itself and it forms a loop. Tag end through the loop as many times as you like. I tend to do 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. Pull the yellow tag end so that the knot cinches down a little. Pull the white tag end so that knot cinches down a little. Moisten. Put them down, put on the yellow and the clear, get them down a bit closer together. Then tighten the knots up. Yellow to yellow, pull. Clear to clear, pull. Clear to yellow, pull. More saliva. Pull as hard as you like. Last thing, just pull, and you can't do this enough times to be honest, because this is the weak point. It's a knot in your line. Knots weaken the line, and if you talk to enough people, People have loads of problems with their shock leader knots breaking. So now we've done that, we can cut the tag ends as close as you like, because you don't want long tag ends to go through your eyes. So in basic terms, there's your shock leader knot. Back to the reel. Put the tension through your fingers. Spool it on. You'll feel the knot go through your fingers. And there it comes down onto the line, onto the spool. Now you want to put the shock leader onto the spool about 3 to 6 turns. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, this is where we can do some other waffle. Do you remember that I said each rod has a casting weight? The casting weight will just define the what's the word I want? Weight of the weight? How heavy a weight you can use. The size of the weight you can use is going to it's going to define the strength you need of your shock leader. Because the whole point of the shock leader is to take the casting shock of casting a 5 ounce weight, let's call this a 5 ounce weight, with a bit of end tackle and a bait out, and absorbing the shock so that the reel and the rod don't absorb the shock. What I've done here, I've got 60 pound line on. What the general rule is, every ounce of lead you chuck out is 10 pound breaking strain of line. Where I fish on the beach, I don't generally chuck anything heavier than a 5 ounce. 5 ounce means I need 50 pound breaking strain. I've got 60 pound breaking strain, which means I can go up to a 6 ounce weight. This rod, 4 to 8 ounces, can easily take 6 ounces. But 5 ounces are general weight that most people around Portsmouth use when they're beach casting. So, there you go. So we now have got our 60 pound shock leader, up the rod, down the rod. What do I do? 6 times there, somewhere around here, cut the line. Now, later on, when you get into fishing a bit more, you might, at this point, attach something to this end of this line, like a rig. But if you start doing rigs, you'll need swivels or links on here to interchange your rigs. I'm not going to worry about this today because this is basic stuff. So I'll come back to what we're going to do on the end here in a minute. I'll just get Charlie to hold that, and I'm going to wind the rest of this shock leader onto, you can let go now, mate, thanks. Going to wind the rest of this shock leader onto the spool. Here's the end, coming through the eyes. When you're doing this, you need to keep tension on the line, because if you let go of this at this point, it'll pading off, and you don't want it to pading off. Could you separate the rod for me, please, Charlie? We don't need that now. And we don't need the rod on the reel anymore. So, you see, the whole reason I needed to put the line on with the rod extended was so that I got the proper length of the shock leader that I needed. Now, just checking to see if this one's got one. Yeah, on every reel, you get a little line keeper here, which you can put your line up under. I do not like doing that because I've read and I've noticed it can damage the line. So when you've got your line on here, do you know what I do? I walk up and down the streets and I pick up the postman's rubber bands. So get a rubber band, stick it on there, and your line now does not go off all over the place. So let's go back to the talk of rigs. What I'm going to use, did I actually say, I'm going to take this setup out now and see if I can catch a fish on it. Actually, I should be able to catch a fish on it. But that's what I'm going to go and do. Because I want you to see, with even cheap old equipment, you can still catch fish. So I'm not going to use a rig per se. I'm going to use what's called a running ledger. Now I'll deal with this in more detail when I get onto the beach. But in essence, I'm going to put on a lead clip onto the line, followed by a bead onto the line. Then I'm going to connect my swivel, which has got a short length of lesser weight line. This is 15-pound line. So that if we snag, this will be the bit that breaks and not the 60-pound line. And then on the end, I've tied a hook. Now, you can choose whatever size swivel, whatever link you want here. But what happens here, this needs to be something that the lead can connect to. And that's in its simplest form, it's just a genie clip. Then we'll have a swivel. Then we'll have a short leader. You can have this as long as you like, but I'm just going to go for a short one. Hook, whatever hook you want. That's the hooks that I like using at the moment, the size 4 Chinoo's. And I'm going to stick a worm bait on there. So, what's there to say? Oh, the knots. Those are just uni knots. You might want to use grinner knots or whatever knots. So the next time you see me, I'll be on the beach and we'll see if we can catch a fish with it. I've had to change the weight to a gripper like that. I'm going to go wide for life and have a look at the cheap rod. Have you seen the diameter of the blank?
Yes.
Beast.
It is. You're staying to wide tide, didn't you?
Yeah.
I'll sit something like that. But yeah, no,
I can have this one on the other light. Can I? Oh, of course. Oh, hello. Did you see that? I just got a bite on the old, on the short rod. Of course, I haven't put any what's it called? The tape on the end of the cobra yet. That's why it's not showing up. Well, that was the first decent bite. Let's hope the thing goes back and eats the bait. Because it is, after all, the rod I want to catch a fish on. So I'm not going to reel it in. Not unless I know it's definitely on the line. But if he had a bite, you'd think he'd go back for a second look, wouldn't he? No, this head touch isn't doing any of the tip lights. Go on then, fish. Hello.
Quick,
Hey?
I've got your line for you as I was driving down.
All right. Thank you.
No worries, keep you going.
All right, thank you very much.
All right. Good luck, Richard.
Thank you. Right, what we got in here then? That was nice of him. Bloke just brought down some frozen bait. Yeah, it's not looking good outside the shelter at the moment. The wind's picked up and it's raining. Right, let's get the other reel, the line in. And that's all you need to do to catch a fish, look. A nice whiting. With that, that's me done.